They say betrayal from a stranger cuts like a knife, but betrayal from your own brother? That's the kind of wound that never really heals. I learned that truth on a cold autumn morning, deep in the forests where my brother Trevor aimed a rifle at me, and smiled. But before I tell you how I turned his plan into his downfall, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Because trust me, you'll want to follow every twist of this story until the very end. My name is Robert Hale. I'm 55 years old, and if you looked at me, you'd probably see an ordinary man. Calloused hands, weathered face, hair already gray at the temples. But behind those lines is a lifetime of grit and survival. I spent 20 years in the Marines before I built my auto repair business from the ground up. I don't come from wealth, but I've worked hard enough to make sure I'll never starve again. My younger brother Trevor, on the other hand, has always walked a different road. 5 years younger than me, he grew up in the same house, with the same parents, the same chances. Yet while I learned discipline and sacrifice, Trevor learned shortcuts and excuses. Where I stayed up nights to pay the mortgage, Trevor racked up debts in casinos. Where I built something lasting, Trevor lived on handouts and empty promises. Still, blood is blood, isn't it? That's what I told myself, even after countless bailouts and endless arguments. Our father passed away years ago, leaving us both equal shares of a small inheritance. I invested mine into expanding the repair shop, turning it into a chain that paid for my children's futures. Trevor. He burned through his cut in under 6 months, leaving nothing but creditors pounding on his door. I thought time would mellow him, maybe make him grow up. But it didn't. If anything, Trevor's hunger only sharpened, especially when he saw the life I'd built. He never congratulated me when I opened my third shop. Instead, he muttered about how unfair it was that I had everything while he had nothing. So when Trevor called one morning with a voice full of forced cheer, I should have recognized the danger. "Rob," he said, "how about a trip? Just the two of us. Like old times. Let's go hunting upstate. Clear our heads. Reconnect." Hunting. We hadn't done that since we were teenagers, back before responsibility weighed me down and temptation swallowed him whole. I could hear something in his tone, too eager, too rehearsed, but I brushed it aside. Part of me wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was Trevor reaching for brotherhood again. The invitation sounded simple. A weekend in the woods. 2 brothers, rifles slung over their shoulders, a campfire crackling under the stars. But deep down, I couldn't shake the instinct that had kept me alive in far darker places. Something wasn't right. The morning we set out, the air carried that sharp autumn bite, the kind that makes your lungs sting with every breath. Trevor pulled up to my driveway in a brand-new pickup truck he had no business owning. I knew his financial situation. The man was drowning in debt. Yet there he was, leaning out the window, grinning like some high roller on his way to Vegas. "Ready to go, big brother?" he shouted. I slung my worn duffel over my shoulder, the same one I'd used on deployments overseas. Inside was my rifle, some camping gear, and, tucked in a hidden compartment, a small recording device. Habit, mostly. Years in the Marines had taught me that when your gut whispers, you listen. And my gut had been screaming ever since Trevor suggested this trip. The first hour on the highway was quiet. He tapped the steering wheel, humming off-key to old rock songs, but every so often, I caught him glancing at me. Not the usual brotherly look, more like a man calculating odds. I turned to the window, watching the trees blur past, and forced myself to remember Sarah's voice. "Robert, you can't save Trevor forever. One day he'll drag you under with him." She had been right about so many things. At the first gas stop, I stretched my legs while Trevor disappeared inside the convenience store. Through the dusty window, I saw him hunched over the counter, whispering into his phone. His hand chopped the air in quick, sharp gestures, the body language of someone issuing orders, not asking questions. When he came back out, he plastered on that same fake grin. "Just checking the weather," he said, slipping the phone into his pocket. "Funny," I replied. "I checked this morning. Forecast says clear skies all weekend." For a moment, his eyes flickered, then he forced a laugh. "Well, you never know. These mountain storms can sneak up on you." We drove deeper into the wilderness, paved roads giving way to gravel, then dirt. Cell service bars dwindled until my phone was nothing but a dead screen. Perfect hunting country, Trevor said, though he'd never been the outdoors type. When we finally parked at the trailhead, I noticed the weight of his pack. It bulged oddly, lopsided. I offered to help adjust the straps, but when I shifted it, something clanked inside, not the sound of gear, but of metal. Chains, maybe. My stomach tightened. The trail swallowed us quickly, dense spruce rising on either side, the canopy stealing most of the daylight. I led the way, instincts guiding me to scan for animal sign, tracks in the mud, broken twigs, distant bird calls. Trevor lagged behind, breathing harder than he should have for a man his age. Every time I slowed, he urged me to go farther, deeper, as though he couldn't wait to be far from anyone else. 3 miles in, we reached a small clearing beside a creek. "This'll do for tonight," I said, shrugging off my pack. But Trevor frowned. "Maybe push on another hour? Get more remote." His eagerness gave him away. I smiled faintly. "We've got time. No rush." While he struggled with the tent poles, I excused myself to collect firewood. In reality, I walked the perimeter, marking escape routes, noting high ground, even setting a thin nylon cord between 2 trees, a silent alarm in case anyone tried to circle our camp. Old habits die hard. When I returned, Trevor had given up, the half-collapsed tent sagging like a defeated animal. "Can you fix this?" he asked, holding out the tangled guidelines like surrender flags. I knelt to help, hiding my thoughts. His hands shook, not from cold, but from nerves. He wanted me tired, distracted, off guard. That night by the fire, the silence pressed in. Flames flickered against his face, throwing shadows that made his eyes look hollow. He asked about my military days, about survival training, even about how you could tell when a man was lying. His questions weren't casual. They were rehearsed, too specific. "Why so curious?" I asked, poking the fire. He smiled tightly. "Just conversation. You always were good at reading people." But I didn't answer. I let the silence hang, knowing it would bother him more than any response. Later, when he volunteered to take first watch, I pretended to be grateful. I crawled into my tent, but I didn't sleep. Not really. Through the nylon walls, I listened. His footsteps weren't casual patrols around the fire. They were measured, deliberate, like a man waiting, not watching. That was when I knew for certain. This was no hunting trip. This was an execution. And I was the target. Dawn broke cold and brittle, mist curling off the creek like smoke from some unseen fire. I emerged from my tent, boots crunching on frosted leaves. Trevor was already up, crouched near the fire pit, hands shoved into his jacket pockets. He looked like a man waiting for something, or someone. "Morning," I said, forcing a casual tone. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood slowly, like he'd been rehearsing the motion. And then I saw it. The rifle already in his hands, barrel leveled at my chest. For a moment, the forest itself went silent. No birdsong, no rustle of branches. Just Trevor's heavy breathing and the faint metallic click as his finger brushed the trigger guard. "Trevor," I said evenly, my Marine training kicking in, steadying my pulse. "Put the gun down." His lips curled into something between a smirk and a snarl. "Funny, isn't it? All these years, you thinking you were the big brother, the protector, the success story. Always ahead of me. Always better. Better? I worked for everything I have." He laughed. Bitter. Hollow. "Worked? Or just got lucky? Dad liked you more. He left you the business, the land, everything that matters. You think I don't know? You think I'm just going to sit back and watch you hoard it all while I scrape by?" My hands itched to reach for the sidearm I'd kept hidden in my pack, but I stayed still. No sudden moves. Keep him talking, I told myself. Talking men aren't shooting men. "You want money? We can figure something out." "No," he snapped. His voice cracked like breaking glass. "I don't want scraps. I want it all. And once you're gone, Everyone will see it makes sense. Tragic accident. Hunting trip gone wrong. Poor Trevor, left to inherit what his brother selfishly clung to. The words hung in the air like poison. He wasn't even ashamed. He'd planned this, rehearsed it, savored it. "You've thought this through," I said quietly. His eyes gleamed. 4 months. I studied him. The twitch in his jaw, the sweat on his brow despite the cold, the way his grip trembled ever so slightly. He wanted to be a killer, but he'd never pulled a trigger on anything more dangerous than a deer. "You point that rifle at me," I said, letting steel creep into my voice. "You better make damn sure it fires. Because if it doesn't, Trevor, I swear to you, I'll make sure you regret even lifting it." He sneered, raising the barrel higher. "Big words, Rob. Let's see if you're still so tough when you're 6 feet under." His finger tightened on the trigger. Click. A hollow, empty click. Trevor froze, confusion flashing across his face. He tried again. Click. Nothing. I let the silence stretch, then slowly straightened my shoulders. "Looking for these?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass cartridges I'd quietly removed the night before while he snored by the fire. They gleamed in the pale sunlight like golden truth. Trevor's mouth opened, but no words came. His face drained of color. "You think I didn't see this coming?" I said softly. "I smelled your plan the moment you picked me up in that truck. You're not the only one who can set a trap, little brother." His hands shook now, the rifle sagging toward the ground. For the first time, he looked small, not a predator, but a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a growl. "You wanted me gone, Trevor. But out here, in these woods, only one of us walks away in control. And it isn't you." For a long moment, Trevor just stood there, the useless rifle dangling from his hands. His mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water, struggling to breathe. You sabotaged me," he finally stammered. I shook my head slowly. "No, Trevor. You sabotaged yourself the moment you thought you could outsmart me." He dropped the rifle to the dirt with a dull thud, rage twisting his features. "You think this changes anything? You think you can humiliate me and walk away?" I took a step closer, my boots crunching against the frost-hardened ground. My voice stayed calm, controlled, the tone I'd once used to de-escalate terrified young Marines. "Walk away. That's all I've ever wanted. But you couldn't leave well enough alone." His eyes darted, calculating, searching for a way out. That's when his hand went for the hunting knife on his belt. He lunged, sloppy but desperate, the blade flashing in the weak morning sun. But I was ready. I sidestepped, grabbing his wrist, twisting hard until the knife clattered to the ground. With my other hand, I shoved him backward, and he stumbled right into the thin nylon cord I'd strung the night before. His legs tangled, his balance vanished, and he hit the dirt face first with a grunt. Before he could scramble up, I was on him, looping the same cord around his wrists. The wilderness had provided the stage, but the knots were all mine, quick, tight, unbreakable. Within seconds, Trevor was trussed like a wild hog, spitting curses into the leaves. "You planned this," he growled, his cheek pressed into the cold earth. "Damn right I did." I crouched beside him, voice low. "Every movement you made since we left Seattle screamed your intent. The fake phone calls. The clanking pack full of chains instead of food. Your obsession with isolation. I knew you weren't planning a hunting trip, Trevor. You were planning an execution. My execution." He thrashed against the bindings, but the cord only dug deeper into his skin. "You think anyone will believe you? You think they'll take your word over mine?" That's when I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small digital recorder. Its red light blinked steady, merciless. I pressed play. Trevor's own voice spilled into the clearing. "Tragic accident. Hunting trip gone wrong. Poor Trevor, left to inherit what his brother selfishly clung to." His face went white. The sound of his own greed filled the forest, louder than any gunshot. "You wanted a story, Trevor," I said, standing tall above him. Now you're the one who's going to be written into the record, as the man who tried to kill his own brother for money." For the first time since we started this trip, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. The kind that strips a man of every excuse, every mask. I slung my rifle over my shoulder, unloaded, but heavy enough to remind him who held the power now. "Get comfortable, little brother," I said. "The authorities will want to hear your story, word for word." For nearly an hour Trevor lay bound, muttering curses into the dirt, yanking against the cord until his wrists bled. I sat a few feet away, watching the fire die down, the recorder still in my jacket pocket like a loaded weapon. The forest was quiet except for the rush of the creek and Trevor's ragged breathing. "You think this is over?" he spat finally, twisting his head to glare up at me. "You think a little rope and some cheap recording is enough to ruin me? I'll spin this so fast you won't know what's true anymore. I'll say you attacked me, that you tied me up, that you've lost your mind. Everyone knows you're the control freak." His voice shook, but there was still venom in it. The same venom I'd ignored for years, always hoping my brother might change. "You've been spinning lies your whole life, Trevor," I said evenly. "But lies don't last forever. Not when the truth is carved into your own words." For a moment, silence again. Then, suddenly, he rolled hard onto his side, tucking his knees, and with a burst of strength I hadn't expected, snapped the nylon cord halfway through. One frayed strand gave, then another. His arms wrenched free. Before I could react, he surged to his feet, face twisted with triumph. "You underestimated me, Rob." He bolted into the trees, stumbling but fast, branches whipping against his jacket. For a second, I let him go. I wanted him to taste that flicker of freedom, that illusion of escape. Because I knew what he didn't, I'd prepared for this too. The night before, while he'd pretended to stand guard, I'd walked the tree line, setting subtle snares in the underbrush, old tricks from survival training. A tripwire strung low across a deer path. A shallow pit concealed with brush. Little reminders that out here, the wilderness always takes the unprepared. And then it came. A sharp yelp, the snap of tensioned rope, and Trevor's shout cut off by the sound of his body slamming into the ground. I followed the noise and found him dangling upside down, ankle caught in the snare, swinging helplessly from a thick spruce branch. His arms flailed, his face red from blood rushing down. "You son of a—" "Cut me down!" he screamed, thrashing like a trapped animal. I stood below him, arms folded. Funny, isn't it? A man so eager to play predator, now hanging like prey. "Rob, please." His voice cracked now, panic bleeding through the anger. "I wasn't gonna do it. I swear. I lost my temper." "Save it," I said coldly. "The recorder already told me the truth. And when the police hear it, you'll be explaining every word in front of a judge." He swung, reaching for the knife he'd dropped earlier, but it lay far out of reach, glinting uselessly in the dirt. The same way his ambitions had always glinted, close enough to see, never close enough to earn. I knelt, picking up the knife, turning it in my hands. "You know what Dad used to tell us when we were kids?" I said. "In the forest, character shows itself. Some men build fire. Others burn with envy." Trevor whimpered, his bravado collapsing as surely as the rope cut into his leg. "Looks like we found out which one you are." I sheathed the knife, turned my back, and walked toward camp. Behind me, Trevor howled, voice echoing through the trees, not with power, but with desperation. The trap had snapped shut. The next morning, the forest felt different. Not dangerous anymore, not tense, just cold, damp, indifferent. Trevor hung in the snare until his voice grew hoarse from screaming. When I finally cut him down, it wasn't mercy. It was logistics. You can't drag a man 10 miles to the truck if he's unconscious. I bound his wrists tighter this time, with paracord reinforced by zip ties I'd tucked into my pack. Old habit, always carry more than you think you'll need. He stumbled along behind me, tripping on roots, cursing through cracked lips. I didn't answer. Not once. His words meant nothing now. By noon we reached the trailhead. My truck waited there like a promise of civilization. I shoved him into the back seat, locked the doors, and started the long drive toward town. Every mile of dirt road felt like a weight lifting off my chest. At the state police station in Fairbanks, I walked Trevor inside, still bound. The young desk officer's eyes widened. "Sir, what's going on here?" I placed the recorder gently on the counter. "Attempted murder," I said. "Premeditated. My brother planned to kill me out there in the woods." They took him from me then, processing him with the efficiency of men and women who'd seen violence too many times before. Fingerprints. Mugshots. Shackles. I watched without expression. For years I'd imagined dragging him out of bars, dragging him out of debt. Now I watched him dragged into a cell. Detective Laura Henderson led me into an interview room, gray walls, humming fluorescent light. She clicked the recorder on her laptop, listening with growing disbelief as Trevor's own voice condemned him. Tragic accident. Hunting trip gone wrong. Poor Trevor, left to inherit what his brother selfishly clung to. When it finished, she leaned back, arms crossed. "Mr. Hale, I've been in law enforcement 15 years. I've seen ugly custody battles, inheritance disputes, families torn apart by greed. But this is cold-blooded. Tell me something I don't know," I muttered. "The DA will charge him with attempted murder in the first degree," she continued, "along with conspiracy to commit fraud, reckless endangerment, and weapons violations. With the evidence you've provided, he won't wiggle out of this." Through the narrow window, I saw Trevor hunched on a bench in the holding area, his head in his hands. For the first time in my life, I felt nothing for him. No brotherly bond. No pity. Just the clarity of a man who had finally stopped making excuses. 2 weeks later, in a Fairbanks courtroom, I took the stand. The prosecutor guided me through the events. The invitation, the suspicious behavior, the rifle, the recording. Every detail spilled into the record, carved into transcripts that would outlive both of us. Trevor sat at the defense table, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. He wouldn't meet my eyes. When the recording played for the jury, the room went silent except for his own greedy words echoing through the speakers. It took them less than 4 hours to reach a verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern Alaskan with ice in his gaze, pronounced the sentence, 22 years in state prison. No parole for at least 15. As they led Trevor away in chains, he finally looked at me. His mouth formed words I couldn't hear, but I knew what they were. "This isn't over." But he was wrong. For me, it was over the moment he raised that rifle and pulled the trigger on an empty chamber. Everything since then had just been paperwork. The courthouse doors swung shut behind me, sealing Trevor's fate in brick and steel. 22 years. I should have felt relief, maybe even triumph. Instead, what I felt was empty. Betrayal doesn't give you victory. It gives you scars. I walked down the steps into the crisp Alaskan air, the mountains jagged against the horizon. For the first time in weeks, the cold didn't bother me. It felt honest. Brutal, yes, but honest. The way family should have been. That night in my motel room, I spread documents across the desk. Not police reports this time. Not court transcripts. My will. My estate plans. For decades I had convinced myself that everything I built, the shops, the land, the money, should go to my family. That was what Sarah would have wanted, wasn't it? But as I stared at Trevor's face in the booking photo, I realized the truth. Family isn't blood. Family is trust. Family is loyalty. And Trevor had burned that to ash the moment he tried to trade my life for a few $1 million. So I called my attorney in Seattle. We drafted a new will that night. My wealth wouldn't rot in some bank account for opportunists to fight over. It would build scholarships for kids who wanted to learn a trade. It would fund veterans programs, shelters, the kinds of places Sarah had volunteered at before she died. Trevor's betrayal had taught me something I should have learned long ago. Money given without responsibility is poison. And I wasn't about to poison another generation. When I flew back to Seattle, my employees greeted me with worried eyes. They'd heard rumors, seen headlines about local business owner survives murder plot. I looked at each of them and realized they were my real legacy. Not Trevor. Not even the business itself. These men and women who worked beside me every day, they were my family. Weeks later, I received a letter from Trevor. 5 pages of half apology, half demand. He claimed he'd changed. Claimed prison was breaking him. But by the final paragraph, the mask slipped. If you reconsider the inheritance, maybe I can forgive you for setting me up. Forgive me. The words nearly made me laugh. I shredded the letter without reading it twice. Some relationships don't survive attempted murder. And that's fine. One evening, I drove out beyond the city, up into the foothills where the air smelled of pine and the stars came out clearer than in town. I lit a small fire and sat beside it, alone but not lonely. The crackle of wood, the rush of wind through the trees, it felt like closure. Trevor had brought me into the forest to kill me. Instead, the forest had given me life again. Perspective. Purpose. A future not chained to his failures. As I tossed the last page of his letter into the flames, I thought about Sarah. I hoped she'd be proud. And I thought about you, listening to my story. So let me ask you this. If your own brother tried to kill you for money, would you ever forgive him? Or would you, like me, finally close the door and choose a different inheritance?